So with that being said, I would like to welcome to the stage one of my most favorite tellers, who is like one of my favorite human beings, who is very, very good at what he does. And I am so excited that he agreed to do this tonight. He has told at other Big Easies, but also at just regular SpeakEasies. And this man brings the house down every single time, which is why I have saved him for last. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Ralph Fredericks.
I'm so old, I remember when Stonehenge was a vacant lot. Oh, and I hope I'm dead when they turn it into a Walgreens. 50 years ago, yes, 50 years ago, I was a senior in high school, and Stonewall had changed everything back then. And my life was totally driven by Barbra Streisand and the Funny Girl soundtrack. Don't tell me not to live, just sit and putter. I'm going to tell my parents I'm gay. So I sat them down and I told my parents I was gay. And my mother howled and wept like an Italian war widow who had just burned the Sunday lasagna. And my father took one sip of his beer and said, "I knew that when you were 4. I was free. I was free to go to parties and pool parties and stayovers. And it was at somebody's big party that I was approached one night by this older man. He was in his 40s. And he said, "My name is Robert Massengill." Now, he was Robert Massengill, the heir to the Massengill douche fortune. Now, those of you that don't know Massengill, because it was kind of old-fashioned, you think of like Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop and a $75 candle that smells like her vagina, or you think of, what's her name, who like sells all the pure things for, diapers and things, Jessica Alba. Well, I asked Bob, I said, "What is it that you do?" He said, "Seriously? Every time a man makes a woman feel like shit, I make 50 cents. Bob, yes, he did. I think it's kind of funny, actually. Bob liked me, and I was young, and believe it or not, I was really kind of hot. I had my day. And he bought me my very first suit. It was a navy blue gabardine suit that came from the third best store in town. And he was going to take me out to dinner. Now, when you go out to dinner with the Burger King, they say, "Did you have it your way?" And if you go out with the Maxwell House coffee gal, they say, "Was it good to the last drop?" But when you go out to dinner with the Massengill heir, the waitress inevitably says, when she gives you the salad, "Vinegar and water?" We ordered dinner, and he ordered a shrimp cocktail, and I had never seen a shrimp cocktail. You have to say, I was from Bupkis. I was from nothing. And we had a shrimp cocktail, and I didn't know how to eat it, and he handed me this little fork. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "It's a shrimp fork." I said, "A whole fork just for shrimp? Gosh, this is expensive." Now, after the dinner, he took me to a party where he assumed that I would go into a room in the back, candlelit, and sleep with all his friends. And even I knew at that age, honey, you don't get that for a shrimp cocktail and a cheap suit. So I went away to college. And then after college, I spent a couple of years in Chicago, where I met this exciting woman. She's the most glamorous woman I ever met. And she hired me as her personal assistant. Now, she owned a chain of restaurants called the Hamburger Hamlets, but she also, and I love this, she was the woman that designed all the costumes for Marlo Thomas and That Girl, Cardinale. So we go to Washington, D.C. I'm in the corporate apartment, and one night she's supposed to go to the big National Horse Show. Now, the National Horse Show is a huge social event in Washington But she was sick, and she said, Ralph, I've got the ticket. I've already paid for the limo for the night. Why don't you go? So I did. And the man who actually was the host of the table where I sat was named Pierre Franchapou. And Pierre Franchapou was the French cultural attaché to Washington, D.C. He was really charming. And he had that sort of thing where he could wear all the guerlain he wanted, but underneath he still smelled like a Frenchman, which I loved. At the end of the night, he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I've got this limo. I'm going to drive around in this limo. He said, well, let me come with you. He grabbed a bottle of champagne, 2 glasses. We get in the limo. He closes the partition. And then 3 hours later, when I dropped him back at his place, I had an entirely new respect for the height of the Washington Monument. I didn't know if I'd ever hear from him again, but I did. He called me and asked me to come to a party at his residence. I said, this will be fun. He said, it's casual. I said, great. So I go and I like him. And on this table are all these dits and dots and doots of snacky things, to have with drinks. And there's a round container of like black jelly. And then I said, what is that? He said, that's beluga caviar. Try it. So I grab a spoon and I start to get the caviar, and he pulls my head back and says, whoa, you never put silver in caviar. You use a mother of pearl caviar paddle. Well, I knew what a shrimp fork was, and now I knew what a caviar paddle was. I could rule the world. So I'm eating the caviar, and there are 2 guests that are running late. And finally they arrive, and the first one coming through the door is Senator John Warner, this conservative Southern Virginia senator. Also, he was accompanied by his new wife, who was this Hollywood star who had decided to give up the movies and go live on a farm. It was Elizabeth Taylor. No. This wasn't like Cleopatra, Canada Hot Tin Roof Cleopatra. No, this was moo-moo, pissed off. Why did I do this? I hate this. Where's the bourbon and the chicken wings, Elizabeth Taylor? And she sat across from me during dinner, and we're playing, and her husband, she's pissed. And she's getting so drunk, and she's so pissed, because her husband's like hitting on some debutante at the end of the table. And I looked at her at one point, and I said, I'm sorry. And she took my hands in her face and said, honey, they're just men, baby. They're just men. I loved it. Well, I spent a few months with Pierre France, and we would go to the opera and the theater and all that stuff that you do as a cultural attaché. And then he had to go back to France to be with his wife and children I knew nothing about. But he gave me a goodbye gift, and it was a beautiful, cream-colored, perfect silk shirt from Yves Saint Laurent on the Avenue Montaigne, with a little note inside that said, adieu. Oh God, I loved it. Adieu. So I decided I'm going to go to New York and be an actor like I wanted to be. Well, I go to New York, I've got a suit, I've got a silk shirt, I know about caviar, I know all this stuff. So I moved to New York. I can't get an acting job. Nobody wants it, please. They already had Nathan Lane. So there I am. But I do get a job as a bartender at the Grand Hyatt Hotel, which is the new hotel right at Grand Central Station, built by Donald and Ivana Trump. A different story, bitch, we'll talk later. So, while I'm bartending, occasionally, this beautiful man, when I say gorgeous, I mean you could slice cheese on his jaw. It was so strong. He did look like a Banana Republic ad. Would come in because he was going to go to spend the weekend, he'd come every Thursday, with his family in Connecticut. He was taking the train. Well, we really hit it off, and he started coming a little earlier, and a little earlier, and a little earlier. And we talked, and I found out that his family was very wealthy. They lived in Connecticut, and they made all of their money, I swear to God, from pajama buttons. They made zillions of dollars making all the world's pajama buttons. Well, he asked me out to dinner. Well, I needed a new suit, but I was making coins, so I bought my own suit this time. But he takes me to a restaurant called Le Grand Nuit. Now, Le Grand Nuit, you have no concept. This was when French restaurants meant something. There were flowers everywhere, and the waiters were gorgeous. Even the busboys looked like movie stars. And we sat down, and he ordered a bottle of Pouligny Montrachet and Dover Sole. Now, I know what Dover Sole was, but it took 4 people to serve it. 1 people to wheel it out, 1 person to cut it, 1 person to toss it, 1 person to put it in front of us. And yes, I learned how to use a fish knife. While we were having dessert, I said, "Walter, teach me something." And he pondered it for a second, and he said, "Ralph, a gentleman needs 3 things: a good fountain pen, a fine watch, and engraved, not printed, stationery, hopefully from Smithson of London." I'd settle for the fish knife. Well, we really began, I think, it was a really tender relationship. And I really loved him, except I never really met his family and his friends. We were kept very private. His family was very conservative, and they didn't know he was gay. And he was like part of the business, and it was just really hard. There was a disease going around that had no name. My friends were dying. Walter got sick. And Walter got enraged with me because the angel of death had just happened to not knock at my door, but it landed in his. One day, they wouldn't put him in a hospital in New York because it just so happened somebody from New York may have heard that he was there. And they spirited him away like the wrath of God to Connecticut. I never spoke to him or saw him again. But I knew that I would never be with somebody who was ashamed to introduce me to anyone. A couple weeks after Walter died, a delivery man came to where I was working at the bar and handed me this beautiful, small burgundy shopping bag with the word Cartier in gold across the front. The perfect, famous jeweler. So I excused myself and I went to the employee's room and I opened up a box, and in it was a solid gold fountain pen with no note. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't stand the death and the sadness. So all I wanted to do was party. I just wanted to hide and party. So I started going to discos and bars and clubs and after-hours clubs. And one there I met a famous designer named Clovis Ruffin. Clovis Ruffin was sort of a third-rate Halston. Really, today he would be in Topshop. But he was famous. And I started hanging out with him. Now, he never fed me, but he gave me a silver spoon, a small silver spoon on a long chain to make it easier to shovel the mounds of cocaine he always had on his person. I lost 4 months of my life. And let me tell you, if you think Dover Sole is expensive, try addiction. I went one night to the same bar to see him, but he was already chatting up some other guy. And the other guy turned out to be this famous gay porn star called Scorpio. Scorpio. Now, Scorpio's claim to fame was that he had just starred in this big budget, like gay porn film that was kind of like a gladiator thing. I mean, they had costumes and everything. Now, in the story, Scorpio plays this runaway slave. And for the whole movie, he is stumping his way across every place in Rome. He's with the priests, he's with the shepherds, he's with everybody. And finally, they catch him. He says nothing. Scorpio is silent. And they bring him back and they throw him in front of the king. And the king says, "Oh, Scorpio, you are back and now you are mine." He said, "Caesar, I am not a slave. I am Demetrius. I am a centurion of Rome." Needless to say, so I'm not doing drugs and I'm living my life, and thank God I still had my wit and my wardrobe. And one day I'd gone to see a Sondheim revival with a friend was in it, and I stopped. I was walking in the Upper West Side by this bar called Boot Hill. It had a vaguely Western theme. You know, you walk in there, peanuts on the floor, and a bunch of queens in like cowboy boots scooting to Tanya Tucker. And I sat there, I ordered a Campari or something, I think, and I looked across the bar, and there was this tall, skinny guy with big ears, wearing jeans that were too short, and like a tank top, and I'm in head to toe Ralph Lauren, including some like blazer that was made from unborn sheep or something. But I walked over to him and I said, "Hi, my name is Ralph." He said, "My name is Joe." I said, "Could I put my head on your shoulder for just a minute?" And he said, "Yes." In the morning, I woke up on his little apartment. I mean, I've been used to, Walter and places. This little studio apartment with a futon on the floor. And he brought me a cup of coffee. And with it, there was a plastic spoon from some takeout place. And I was in love. We both had burned our bridges in New York, and so we moved to Washington, D.C., and he's a designer, his design business, and I fell into a career I really loved. We redid a Victorian house in a good neighborhood. We got a West Highland Terrier we named Joni Mitchell. We had a Jamaican housekeeper that came, and every Wednesday she would leave us jerk chicken for dinner. Her name was Ina. We ultimately bought a house in the country which had a big, antique French farmhouse table in it, which we would surround with our friends for these fabulous meals. There'd always be A gays and B gays, and a couple of straight accountants from down the street who had such sparkle to a party. One of those days after they all left, Joe came down, and I could tell he'd been drinking, and he said, "Ralph, I'm in love with somebody else. I don't want to be with you anymore." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because he's so simple." Oh, I wanted to be a top so bad. Oh God, I wanted to be Butch. And I said, "Well, what makes us different?" And he said, "Ralph, he doesn't even have one cashmere sweater." Well, what could I do? Well, my heart was broken. I moved out. I didn't want the house, moved out, moved to a fabulous condo downtown. 2 days later, I arranged to get a nose job, a chin implant, and liposuction. I thought that would make me happy. And I lived my life, a successful life, knew lots of people, things were good. And then one day, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. I stayed in Washington fighting it, fighting it. I had lung cancer, fighting it. And I would write checks and checks and checks and checks and checks until there were no checks left to write. But it didn't matter really, because they had said, oh, I love this. They always say, like in the movies, it's time to get your things in order, Ralph. You have 6 months left to live. My sister said, you're coming home. You're getting down. Come on, you're coming home. You're coming back to Ohio. We'll take care of you. I sold my art. I sold my antique French farmhouse table, which I had gotten in the divorce. A lot of the stuff I just called friends and said, take it. I did pack 2 big boxes, which my sister said later on, because I was kind of delirious. She said, Ralph, you packed 18 sweaters and a bunch of original Broadway cast CDs. I wanted to say, what more do I need? At the worst of my illness, I was literally in a coma, and they said, we think he won't make it through the week. My sister found Joe's phone number and called him. He got up from his chair, put extra food for the cat, put on a coat, got in his car, and drove 10 hours in a blizzard just to sit next to me for a night. That's what love is like. A few months later, I had turned the corner, and I was better. And I got this big box, heavy box that Joe had sent me, and I opened it up, and inside there was a card that said, when you're ready for a table to put this on, just let me know. And I opened up the box, and inside were 12 place settings of English plated silver that had been forged the year I was born. Honey, I was like an old courtesan going through her jewelry to prove that she had once been loved for her favors. I had shrimp forks and fish knives and bouillon spoons. I got better, and I moved to Columbus. And I got a job part-time that I love. It keeps me young. I did volunteer work, which I loved. And I started telling stories here at SpeakEasy. It's funny, because after I was better, of course, all my girlfriends started saying, Ralph, you've got to meet someone. So they tried to fix me up with their hairdresser, or their hairdresser, or their hairdresser, or their hairdresser. Now, honey, I have nothing against hairdressers. I am no cowboy myself, but they were all the wrong hairdressers. Then my very dear friend Vicky, who's actually here tonight, surprised me, and signed me up for 6 months of Match.com. It was like, oh God, it was like the Sears catalog of men. I just hated it without the underwear ads. But I did finally connect with some man, a nice guy. So we talked back and forth, and we met for a drink. And then we had another drink, and we had another drink, and he said, would you like to come to my place for a nightcap? And I said, sure. And soon we were in a naked, sweaty clutch on his French provincial sofa. And in the middle of this grope and grab, about 15 minutes into it, this thing comes across my mind that said, I'd rather be home eating pie. So, said, sorry, got up, got dressed, stopped at the Kroger's, and on the way home, and I found this $1.99 half-price pie on the poor person's sale rack. Cherry. So I take it home, and I'm thinking, you know, I have loved, and I have been loved. And if I stayed with a French guy, I'd have a full set of Vuitton luggage. But I can't order love that way. I always met people, and no matter how it ended, it was magic. So I would rather not love someone than not have it spark my heart. I want to be at Whole Foods, and I want to reach for the last avocado and have a man reach for it too, and together we make guacamole. I still have my solid gold fountain pen from Walter. I still have my pawn shop Bon Mercier watch, and at home on my desk there are boxes of engraved, not printed stationery with my name in the most tasteful Walter Gray. So I went to my silver for the first time, and I took out a dessert fork. Yes, I know what they look like. And I took a bite of that cheap-ass pie, and darlings, it tasted expensive. And I thought about words that were once told to me by a very wise woman when she said, "Baby, it's just men. It's just men."